Snow was falling hard that night in Anchorage. In the middle of the storm, a 5-year-old boy lay bleeding in the snow, whispering only 2 words, "Help me." His body was broken, abandoned by the very people meant to protect him. But when a weary officer and his loyal German shepherd stepped into that darkness, everything changed. Anchorage wore the storm like a heavy coat. The night was sharp, the air bitter, and snow fell in relentless sheets, burying roads and muffling sound. Patrol lights glowed faintly through the curtain of white as Officer Daniel Mercer steered his SUV along Tudor Road. Daniel was 40, tall and broad through the chest. A short beard, brown mixed with gray, marked his jaw, and lines around his eyes spoke of years where laughter had been scarce. Since losing his wife in an accident years earlier, he carried himself with restraint. Words used sparingly, emotions locked behind discipline. Beside him rode Shadow, his German shepherd partner. 7 years old, heavy in the chest, black saddle over tan legs, and one ear torn at the tip, Shadow was a dog who had lived enough to understand silence. His amber eyes scanned the world, reading scents and movements before Daniel even looked. The radio murmured about collisions and stranded vehicles, but Daniel's focus sharpened when Shadow stiffened. The dog's head lifted, nose pressed to the window, ears pricked. Daniel slowed the SUV. In the sweep of headlights, he saw it. A scatter of small tracks veering from the sidewalk through the snow toward a chain-link fence. The pattern was uneven. Stumbling dark stains dotted the white. He pulled onto the shoulder, stepped out into the slap of cold, and let Shadow lead. And the dog dropped his head, moving with purpose through a break in the fence and into a stand of spruce where the city lights vanished. Beneath a bowed branch, half covered by drift, lay a boy no older than 5. His small frame was wrapped in a torn puffer jacket, one sleeve soaked dark, with blood. His blonde hair was plastered to his forehead with ice, his lips split in blue, his face pale, except for the angry red of windburn. Bruises wrapped his arm in the unmistakable shape of fingers. Daniel dropped to his knees. Stripping off a glove, he pressed 2 fingers to the boy's neck. A pulse flickered, weak, quick, but alive. The wound at his shoulder was jagged, bleeding sluggishly now in the cold, but dangerous still. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said, his voice low and steady. "You're safe. I've got you." The boy's eyelids lifted, eyes gray-blue and unfocused until they found Shadow's shape beside him. His lips cracked open and a whisper escaped, barely louder than the storm. "Help me?" Daniel swallowed the tightness in his chest. He shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the boy's shivering body. The weight was shockingly light when he lifted him, small bones pressing against his arms. Shadow pressed close, body heat spilling into the space between them. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. The boy blinked, voice thready. "Ethan." Daniel nodded once. "All right, Ethan. Stay with me." He keyed his radio. "Unit 3 to 7. Juvenile male located. Hypothermic. Active bleed stabilized. Need immediate transport." At the SUV, he slid into the back seat with the boy still cradled. Shadow leapt in and curled at Ethan's feet, resting his head on the seat edge. The vents pushed warm air, filling the cab with dusty heat that fought the cold. Daniel pressed his hand against the wound dressing, feeling the small chest rise and fall beneath layers of coat and blanket. Ethan's eyes fluttered open once more. "Don't let him come," he whispered, voice shaking. Daniel leaned close, his tone firm. "He won't. You're safe now." The ambulance tore through the storm, lights flashing against the snow. Inside, the heat blasted from vents, mingling with the scent of antiseptic and cold metal. 2 EMT worked in the cramped space. That night, Daniel sat in a chair at the boy's bedside. Ethan stirred, eyelids fluttering, his eyes open halfway, finding Shadow first, then Daniel. His lips trembled, but a whisper slipped out. "You'll stay?" Daniel leaned closer, his voice steady as iron. "I'll stay. Hal's day." The boy's small fingers, taped with anazzi, brushed weakly against Shadow's fur. The dog shifted just enough to let the boy feel his warmth. Ethan's eyes closed again, breath steadying. Daniel leaned back in the chair, exhaustion pressing into him, but he didn't move. A child would not face his fear alone. The storm outside had broken into a fragile calm. Inside Providence Medical Center, warmth came from machines, heaters, and the careful work of hands trying to keep small lives intact. Ethan lay propped slightly on his hospital bed, his thin frame nearly lost in the folds of a blue blanket patterned with cartoon whales. His blonde hair had dried into soft curls around his forehead, and his blue-gray eyes shifted often towards Shadow, who sat faithfully at the bedside. Daniel had taken the chair again, his broad shoulders hunched forward. He was a man who had learned to read silence because grief had once lived in it. Now, the silence of a 5-year-old boy seemed heavier than gunfire. A nurse stepped in to check vitals. Amelia Torres, petite with dark hair pinned back neatly, smiled gently at Ethan. "Your heart sounds stronger today," she said softly. Ethan stared, then turned his face into Shadow's fur. Later in the morning, Detective Ellison returned. He spoke to Daniel first. "We've got enough to start building charges, but the boy's voice will matter when he's ready." Daniel nodded. "He's not ready yet." As if hearing them, Ethan shifted. His lips parted, voice carrying words like stones dragged from deep water. "He hurt me." Daniel leaned closer, but kept his voice even. "Who hurt you, Ethan?" The boy's small hand, wrapped in tape from the floor, trembled as it reached for Shadow. His eyes stayed fixed on the dog as he whispered, "Ray!" The name hung like smoke. Ellison wrote down, his pen scratching deliberate. "And your mom?" Daniel asked carefully. Ethan swallowed, his face twisting. "She just watched." His voice cracked on the last word, his breath quick and shallow. Shadow pressed his nose against the boy's arm, steadying him. Ethan buried his face in the dog's fur, tears soaking silently. Dr. Meredith Sloan entered. Medium height, auburn hair pulled back, glasses perched low. She carried a stack of paper and a tin of colored pencils. "Hi, Ethan," she said gently. "I'm Meredith. I'm here just to listen. You don't need to talk if you don't want. You can draw instead." "Ah." She set the papers on the tray and slid the pencils close. Ethan didn't move at first, but Shadow nudged his hand. Slowly, the boy reached out, taking a red pencil. His small fingers pressed clumsily, and he began to draw. The lines were jagged, a circle filled with harsh strokes of red and black, then stick figures, one small, one large, with lines radiating like fists. He pressed so hard the pencil snapped. His lip trembled, but then he picked up another, this one blue. Next to the chaos, he drew a crude outline of a dog, ears pointed, standing between the figures. Daniel's chest tightened as he saw it. Shadow wasn't just comfort. He was protector in Ethan's world, a barrier against memory. Dr. Sloan nodded softly, her voice warm. "That's very brave, Ethan. You don't have to explain. Your drawing tells us everything." Through the rest of the day, Daniel noticed changes. The boy taking sips of juice when Shadow stayed close. The way he reached for the dog's ear when footsteps echoed in the hall. How he leaned toward Daniel just slightly when sleep pulled him under. Each movement was small, but each was proof Ethan was learning safety. That evening, as lights dimmed across the ward, Daniel remained at his post by the bed. Ethan stirred, eyes half opening. His voice, fragile but clear, broke the hush. "Don't leave." Daniel leaned in, his gaze steady. "I won't." Shadow lifted his head, exhaled a slow sigh, and lay back down. The door opened with a soft click. Detective Mark Ellison stepped in first. He spoke low to Daniel. "She's here. She's here." Daniel's jaw tightened and Shadow's ears pricked. The dog stood, tail low, body angled toward the door. Then Rachel Whitmore entered. Rachel was in her early 30s, slim but worn thin by neglect. Her long brown hair was brushed hastily, a few strands clinging damp to her cheek. She wore a cheap faux fur jacket and jeans that had lost their shape. Her face bore lines not of age, but of strain, and her pale eyes darted nervously around the room before settling on her son. "Ethan," she breathed, her voice fragile, too thin to bridge the space between them. She stepped closer, clutching her purse strap as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. The boy's eyes widened for a heartbeat. Recognition flashed. Then he shrank back against the pillows, dropping the toy truck. His hand grasped for Shadow, who immediately moved between boy and mother, chest broad, ears flattened in warning. A soft growl rumbled from deep within him. Rachel froze, hand half extended. "Baby, it's me. I came as soon as I could." Ethan buried his face in Shadow's fur, muffling his words, but Daniel heard them clear. "Don't let her." Daniel rose from his chair, his tall frame casting shadow across the room. His voice was calm, but each word carried weight. "He doesn't want this. Not now, but now." Rachel's eyes filled, tears smudging mascara. "You think I don't care? You think I don't love him? You don't know what it's like living with Ray." Ellison's voice cut in. Gravel rough. "We do know. Police records, neighbor reports, 2 calls in the last year. You didn't protect him." He flipped his notebook open. "You stood by while he bled." Rachel shook her head, lips trembling. "I was scared. Ray, he'd turn on me too. I tried." Daniel's gaze didn't waver. His dark eyes seemed carved from stone. "You had one job, to protect your son, and you failed." Rachel's shoulders collapsed, her voice breaking. "I didn't know what else to do." On the bed, Ethan peeked up from Shadow's fur. His face, pale and bruised, carried no softness. His voice, though faint, cut through the room. "You let him." 3 words, each one heavier than the last. Rachel gasped as if struck. Her knees buckled and she gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. She tried again, her words desperate. "Ethan, please, I'm still your mother. I love you." But Ethan turned away, pressing closer into Shadow. Shadow? The dog shifted, his body curved protectively, tail curled around the boy's leg as if sealing him off from her reach. Ellison closed his notebook with a snap. His voice was firm. "Rachel Whitmore, charges of neglect and complicity are under review. You may want to prepare yourself for what's coming." A uniformed officer appeared at the doorway, a silent signal. Rachel's eyes darted once more toward her son, but she didn't step closer. She let herself be guided out, her face streaked with tears. Silence settled heavy after the door shut. Daniel returned to his chair. Ethan's small hand clutched Shadow's ear, his whisper breaking the stillness. She let him. Daniel leaned close, his voice steady, unshakable. "She won't be the one to decide your future. You're safe now." The hospital had grown quieter with evening. Look, Daniel sat by Ethan's bedside, Shadow dozing at the foot of the bed, but his ears flicked every time a cart rattled down the corridor. Detective Ellison had warned him earlier that Ray Donovan hadn't been found. The man had stormed out of his duplex 2 nights ago with a bottle in his hand, in a rage too familiar. Men like him didn't stay gone. The confrontation came sooner than anyone wanted. Raised voices echoed at the far end of the corridor. A nurse shouted for security. Daniel was on his feet instantly, Shadow snapping awake, his body stiff and tail lowered. Through the glass pane of the door, Daniel caught the first sight of him. Ray Donovan was tall but wiry, his body stretched thin by years of alcohol and rage. His denim jacket hung off him, greasy stains dark across the fabric. His dark hair was unwashed, plastered against a gaunt face. His eyes were red-rimmed, bloodshot, and wild. His fists were raw, knuckles split. 2 security guards tried to block him. Ray shoved one aside with surprising force. The other hesitated. Ray's voice rang down the hall, harsh and slurred. "Where is he? Where's that brat? He's mine. You can't keep him from me." Daniel pushed the door open, his frame filling the doorway. "That's far enough, Ray." Ray's gaze snapped to him, lip curling into a sneer. "You again playing hero? You think you can take what's mine?" Behind Daniel, Shadow stepped forward, hackles bristling, teeth flashing as a deep growl rolled from his chest. The sound froze the corridor for a beat. Ray flinched, but he masked it with a shout. "That mutt doesn't scare me." Detective Ellison emerged from around the corner. His gravelly voice boomed. "Ray Donovan, you're under arrest. Stand down now before this gets worse." Ray barked a laugh, brittle and manic. "You got nothing on me. That kid lies. His mother lies. You'll see he'll come back. You'll see he'll come." His words cracked, spit flying. He took a step forward, eyes burning, fists clenched. Daniel stepped out fully into the hall, his body squared, blocking the doorway behind him. His voice dropped into steel. "Ethan's not going back to you. Not now, not ever." That pushed Ray past words. With a guttural shout, he lunged, swinging wide. Daniel moved instinctively. He sidestepped, caught Ray's wrist mid-swing, and twisted sharply, locking the man's arm behind his back. Ray cursed, his body jerking, but Daniel's grip was iron. Shadow circled low, teeth bared, every muscle taut, a warning embodied. Ray froze as the growl grew louder, primal, promising violence if Daniel faltered. Ellison closed in, pulling cuffs from his belt. With a swift motion, he snapped them onto Ray's wrists. The click of steel against bone filled the corridor like final judgment. Ray thrashed, spitting curses. "You don't understand. He's mine. He belongs to me." Daniel leaned close, his voice low and edged. "He belongs to no one but himself, and he's safe now." The deputies arrived, guiding Ray down the hall, his shouts echoing, hollow now, fading until the corridor reclaimed silence. Daniel stepped back into the room. Ethan sat upright in bed, his fire truck clutched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His eyes were wide, fearful, but fixed on Daniel and Shadow. "He was here," the boy whispered. Daniel sat back down, his tall frame lowering until his eyes met the child's. His voice carried certainty carved into promise. "Yes, but he's gone now. He won't touch you again." Shadow climbed gently onto the side of the bed, careful of the tubes, pressing his head into Ethan's lap. The boy's small hands sank into the thick fur, trembling but steadying with each breath. Slowly, Ethan leaned into the dog's warmth, eyes closing. Detective Ellison stood in the doorway, watching the scene. His voice was quieter now. "He'll face charges. The kid's safe." He turned his gaze to Daniel, his expression softened just enough to show respect. "You did good." Daniel didn't answer. He only watched Ethan relax against Shadow. Outside, snow fell in gentler flakes. Inside, one truth anchored the room. Ethan was no longer alone in his fight. The days that followed moved slower. Ethan's recovery was uneven. At times he seemed brighter, sitting up to sip juice or turning pages of a picture book. Other times he shut down, clinging to Shadow's thick coat as if the dog alone kept the world at bay. Daniel rarely left the room. Dr. Meredith Sloan introduced a new approach. She entered one morning with a canvas tote filled with paper, colored pencils, and a small box of modeling clay. "Ethan," she said gently, kneeling by his bed, "sometimes when we can't find words, our hands know what to say." Ethan hesitated, glancing at Shadow, who nudged his hand forward with a wet nose. Slowly, the boy reached for the clay. His small fingers worked clumsily, rolling pieces into shapes. At first only lumps, then gradually a crude figure of a tall man with stick arms. Next to it, a smaller figure with rounder edges, and beside them both, a dog with pointed ears. Ethan set the clay down and whispered, "Us." Meredith's eyes softened. "That's a family, Ethan, one you trust." Hannah Briggs, the social worker, also visited more frequently. Tall, with straight blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, her pale green eyes carried both empathy and exhaustion. "Daniel, the state will need to make a placement decision soon. Temporary guardianship is one thing, but longer-term care, we need to plan." Daniel's gaze didn't leave Ethan as he replied, "He's not going back to them." Hannah sighed. "I know, but we've procedures hearings. These things take time. In the meantime, he needs consistency. Someone he can depend on." Her eyes lifted, studying Daniel carefully. "You've already become that someone." That night, Ethan had a nightmare. His cries tore through the ward, sharp and panicked. Daniel was at his side before the nurses arrived. "Ethan, it's me. You're safe. He can't get you." Shadow leapt onto the bed, pressing against the boy's chest, his weight grounding him. Ethan's hands tangled in the dog's fur, his breaths ragged until they slowed to match Shadow's steady rhythm. When silence returned, Ethan whispered through tears, "You won't leave." Daniel smoothed the boy's hair back, his voice quiet but resolute. "Not now, not ever." The following morning, Meredith asked Ethan to draw again. This time, the boy reached for a green pencil and sketched a house on even lines, a crooked roof but a door wide open. Outside stood the same three figures, the tall man, the small boy, and the dog with pointed ears. Ethan pointed to it and murmured, "Home." Daniel looked at the drawing for a long moment. Something shifted deep inside him. The boy wasn't asking for shelter, he was asking for belonging. Later that day, as the ward settled into evening quiet, Daniel stood by the window. Snow still lined the city, but the sky had cracked open just enough to let sunlight pour through. Behind him, Ethan slept soundly, Shadow curled beside him, both wrapped in the fragile peace of trust. Daniel whispered to himself, barely audible, "Maybe this is where it starts again." And for the first time in years, he believed it. Anchorage's courthouse stood cold against the pale morning light. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. Daniel walked alongside Ethan, the boy's small hand tucked tightly into his own. Ethan wore a navy sweater donated by the hospital, the sleeves slightly too long. At his other side padded Shadow, moving with quiet authority. Detective Mark Ellison met them at the security checkpoint. "They'll have you testify today, Daniel. The boy, too. But the judge will allow accommodations. We'll keep it short." His gravelly voice softened a notch as he looked at Ethan. "You've got nothing to be afraid of. Just tell the truth." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere tightened. "You." At the bench sat Judge Eleanor Harding, tall and composed, her black robe pressed sharp, her silver-gray hair cut neatly at her jaw. Her face was serious, every line etched from years of refusing excuses. Her eyes, however, softened when they fell on Ethan. Ethan. She tapped her gavel once, and the room hushed. At the prosecution's table stood Linda Park, mid-30s, hair sleek and black, her dark suit crisp. Known for calm precision, she carried herself with quiet confidence. On the defense side sat Rachel Whitmore. She had tried to appear polished, hair pulled back, blouse ironed, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Her pale blue eyes darted to her son, desperate. But Ethan immediately looked away, tightening his grip on Daniel's hand. Ray Donovan was brought in under guard. Shackled, his wrist marked red from iron. He wore the orange of the county jail. His gaunt face bore stubble rough as sandpaper, and his dark eyes flickered between fury and disdain. His sneer curled when his eyes fell on Ethan. Shadow bristled, growling low, a sound that filled the courtroom with tension. Judge Harding raised her gaze. "The dog remains," she said firmly. "If he calms the child, he stays." Proceedings began. Linda Park presented medical reports, photographs of Ethan's bruises, and testimony from hospital staff. Her voice was steady, deliberate. Then came the time for testimony. Hannah Briggs escorted Ethan to the stand. He looked small against the high wooden chair, his feet dangling, but Shadow sat at the base of the witness box, his head resting against Ethan's leg. Daniel sat nearby, close enough for the boy to see his face. Linda crouched slightly to meet his eyes. "Ethan, can you tell us who hurt you when—" Ethan's lips trembled, his voice barely a whisper. "Ray!" He lifted a thin finger toward the man in orange. Ray shifted in his seat, muttering under his breath, but the deputies pressed him back down. Linda's tone softened. "And was anyone else there?" "And—" The boy's eyes flicked toward Rachel, then away just as fast. "Mom." She watched. The last word caught in his throat, but it landed heavy in the room. Rachel broke, sobbing. "Ethan, no. I wanted to help." Judge Harding struck the gavel once. "Order." Ethan buried his face into Shadow's fur. The dog pressed closer, steady as stone. Judge Harding leaned forward, her expression firm but kind. "That is enough for today. The child has spoken with clarity." Next came Daniel's turn. He stood tall in the witness box. He recounted the night in the snow, the trail of blood, the whisper for help, the bruises carved by human hands. His voice remained steady, though his fists clenched at the memory. When arguments closed, Judge Harding's tone carried weight. "The testimony given today is credible, consistent, and heartbreaking. This court will deliberate, but let it be clear. The child's safety is paramount." As the gavel fell, tension bled out of the room. Ray was hauled away, spitting curses. Rachel was escorted out, her face streaked with tears. Ethan slid from the witness chair into Daniel's arms, clutching tightly. Shadow circled them, tail low, ears forward, a sentinel against ghosts that still lingered. Daniel whispered into Ethan's hair, steady and sure, "You're safe now. You're safe now. You're not going back." For the first time in days, Ethan allowed himself to believe it. The final hearing was scheduled on a clear morning. Anchorage woke under a pale sky. The snow finally softened into slush along the courthouse steps. Daniel walked with Ethan through the entrance, Shadow moving steadily at their side. The boy clutched Daniel's hand tightly. The courtroom was less crowded than before, but tension hung thick. Judge Eleanor Harding sat with her usual composure. To one side, Linda Park organized her files. On the other side sat Rachel Whitmore, her face pale, makeup smudged from tears she could not contain. Ray Donovan entered shackled, guarded by deputies. His orange jumpsuit hung loose on his wiry frame, his dark eyes still restless with defiance. Judge Harding's gavel cracked. "This court is in session." Linda Park rose, her voice steady. "The evidence is clear. Repeated abuse, neglect, and endangerment. This child deserves not only justice, but a future free of fear." Rachel's lawyer spoke weakly of desperation and fear. But the words dissolved against the weight of testimony. Ray's attorney attempted to discredit the child's account, but the scars on Ethan's body, the drawings he made, and Daniel's sworn words had already spoken louder. When the moment came, Judge Harding leaned forward, her voice carrying across the chamber. "Ray Donovan, this court finds you guilty of aggravated assault and child endangerment. You are sentenced to 20 years in state prison with no parole before 10. Rachel Whitmore, though your hands did not strike, your silence and inaction made you complicit. Custody of your son is terminated. He will not return to your care." Rachel broke into sobs, collapsing into her chair. "Ray to leave." Ray cursed, thrashing in his cuffs, his words drowned by deputies dragging him away. For a moment, the courtroom was filled with chaos. Then the gavel fell again and silence returned. Judge Harding's tone softened as she turned to Ethan. "Young man, you have shown great courage. You are no longer bound to fear. The state will review placement, but the testimony of Officer Mercer and the bond with his service dog weigh heavily in consideration. Today, your freedom begins." Daniel's chest tightened at her words. He looked down at Ethan, who stared at the judge with wide eyes, then at him. "Does that mean I stay with you?" the boy whispered. Daniel bent, his beard brushing the boy's hair as he answered, "Yes, that means you're safe. You'll come home with me." Ethan's small arms wrapped around Daniel's neck, clinging with a strength his thin frame shouldn't have had. Shadow pressed his head against their legs, tail thumping softly as if sealing the promise. Outside the courthouse, the city moved as it always did. Cars and slush, pedestrians with scarves, the world unaware of the verdict just passed. But for one boy, one man, and one dog, everything had changed. That evening, Daniel's modest home glowed with firelight. The wood stove crackled, filling the living room with warmth. Ethan sat cross-legged on the rug, Shadow curled beside him. He drew with colored pencils again, this time more carefully. When he held up the paper, Daniel's throat caught. It showed 3 figures, a tall man, a boy, and a dog, standing in front of a small house beneath a bright yellow sun. Above the door, Ethan had scrolled one word in large, uneven letters: home. Daniel sat back in his chair, exhaustion settling over him, but for the first time in years, his chest felt lighter. He looked at Ethan, then at Shadow, and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks for survival, for second chances, and for the small miracle that had walked into his life on a night of snow and blood. For Ethan, safety was no longer a dream. For Daniel, hope had returned. And for Shadow, the old shepherd with the scarred ear, the mission was simple. Guard this family no matter what. The storm had ended. A new dawn had begun.